and this is the beginning of an interview with Sam Nederlander at his home in Portage, Pennsylvania. Sam, okay, could you please tell me your rank?
I was a corporal,
Okay, and what branch of the service did you serve in?
in the Army.
And where did you serve?
Well, I was several places, but I landed on Utah Beach on D-Day.
Could you tell me some of the natures of your duties during the war?
I was a company clerk, and I had charge of 226 service records of the men in my company. And that's why we had that incendiary bomb in that desk, because Mr. Bennett says, if you have to retreat, you better start eating service records. I said, we don't have enough salt. And he said, well, your incendiary bomb will do the trick then. Well, when the war was over, we were getting ready to break up. We got the engineers to come and get the incendiary bombs to let go, you know, it wouldn't work. Part of the Army.
Right. Did you volunteer or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
All right.
How old were you when you joined the military?
21.
What were your remembrance of boot camp?
Miserable.
Was
Couldn't
there,
give you anything more.
do you remember about your instructors, anything significant?
Well, we had some good instructors and we had some bad instructors. And the reason I'm not back, wasn't back in the Army, because I had a fellow that was my sergeant that was from Kentucky. And one day he said to me, Corporal, you're supposed to help me write a letter to my mother and my brother. And he was going to be my sergeant. I thought, no way.
Right. Can you describe the military food?
Terrible.
Terrible. Did you eat Spam or SOS?
Spam and SOS. I didn't eat the SOS, but the Spam, I put up with that.
Did you get any character building duties like KP, mess hall, guard
Yes,
duty?
I had, in basic training, I had KP, and I had barracks orderly, and I think that was about it. Barracks orderly, I remember, I had everything all cleaned up and had passed inspection, and then we always just stayed in the barracks. And they had a fire whistle at Indian Down Gap, just like South Works, and I belonged in South Works. Woke me up right away.
What anything really you remember about like the KP duty you were talking about?
Well, KP duty wasn't as bad as we thought it was, because we had dishwashing machines, and they put our trays in, did that. And barracks orderly, all you had to do is make sure everybody had their bunk made up and everything was clean around it. So it really wasn't a hard job.
Okay. What do you remember about your officers? Is there one special officer you remember?
Yes, Captain Ring.
What do you remember about him?
He was a man that was a man. He told us, he says, just remember, your enemy is as trained as well as you are. So keep 1 foot ahead of the enemy. And one time we were out on a drill field and we could drill like nobody's business, and I don't know what happened. And that was the first time I ever heard Captain Ring swear. He turned around and wanted to know what we did wrong, because it was drill day or something, I don't know. But he was a man. He was from Texas, and everybody was his patient. In other words, a man had some troubles at home, he would listen. And he was good to me, very good to me. And when it came time for chow, there was such a big line, I couldn't get to the chow and get back to the earlier room in an hour's time. So he wrote me out a pass. So when I went to the mess hall, gave it to the mess sergeant, and he let me go eat. And I'll tell you what, they were short $2,000 at the pay office. They counted over and over, and they were still short. They earned a nickel. And then when they came to pay the men, they were $2,000 short. And you know, we had to have a breakdown and search everything to everybody, and he was still short. Now that $2,000, the men that got paid made that up for Captain Ring, so nothing would happen to
Okay. What regulations were very frustrating in the service?
them. So I can't remember them all, but there was some. If you wore a necktie, you didn't have to wear leggings. If you wore leggings, you didn't have to wear a necktie. So that's some of the restrictions. It just seemed simple to me. And of course, if you were going to the battalion headquarters or something, you had to have a Class A uniform on.
Mhm. Who was the most unforgettable character that you ever met in the service, and why?
We just talked about that. I had an interview here with a girl she was from State College, and she came to Portage and interviewed Earl Costello, and she was a Johnson. And she came to me and interviewed me, and she sent me a copy of it. And I have in there the most person I ever met was a fellow named Frank Monjovi. And he had a hamburg stand on Wall Street in New York. And during the Depression, he saw men jumping out windows when broke from the Depression. And every time he said, Frank, tell them a story about Wall Street, he always told about these men jumping out windows. So, and Frank carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. And one day our first sergeant, Sergeant Castellano, says, Frank, if you don't get the crude oil and burn out those latrines, I'm going to court-martial you. So he gets 2 cans of crude oil, niggas in, and there's the guys there using the latrine. Get out, I'm going to burn it out. You can't, so we're out of here. I'm burning them now. And they hurried up and got out of there. He lit them, and the thing blew out, blew across the street, and all corruption was on this building across the street. They had to get the fire company out to wash the building down. He carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. And then when we lived in Cherbourg, there were rooms, you know, and there was cold, and each one got some kind of a stove. And something about the chimney in the room he was in was locked or something. And you could always tell because as soon as you smelled the smoke, you know where it was coming from. So this morning, the mailman and I went out in the hall with Monjovi's room. So we went up, and then we crawled on our hands and knees into the room to get him out of there, make sure he was out. And I got a hold of one foot, and Paul got the other. And said, what are you guys doing? Come on, get out of here. Get out of this smoke. I can't, I'm shaving. I didn't know Paul said, how in the hell can you see? And he said, leave me alone like it's shaved.
What were your opinions of the equipment, clothing, rations, and the training of the U.S. military?
Well, the training was tough because we weren't used to it. I never handled a gun till they gave me one for basic training. And some of the sergeants or instructors were very good, some weren't as good as the others. And basic training was rough because we lived in Indian Town Gap, and we were in what they called Area 16. We didn't have regular barracks like you see in pictures. We had long barracks like the 3 Cs had, and there's 3 pot-bellied stoves in the building to keep you warm. And there's a stove on each end and one in the middle. And then you had like KP duty, and they had men that took care of the fires when it was cold. One night the guy was taking care of came in, he was drunk, and he got a bucket of coal. He picked it up and stepped back and made a run for the stove, and he missed it. The coal went all over the barracks. And then in January 43, or 41, at dinner time, it was still 10 below zero. They didn't have any formation. And at dinner time, they said, anybody who wants to go venture out and go eat can go eat, because it was so cold. And they mopped the floor around the hot-bellied stove. It was dried up, but where the rest of the barracks, it was icy. And fellows put all the clothes on they ever had. It was that cold.
What part of the world did you like best in your military experience?
I think Scotland.
Why?
That's where we landed. It was very peaceful, very calm, and when the troop train pulled in, they had a community band there that played for us. But I went from Scotland down to Plymouth, England. And I was in the port battalion. They loaded and unloaded ships for the service. So they loaded ships in Portland for the invasion. And we had a lot of activity there. And they moved my company out into the country, but I had to stay with the battalion. I was company clerk in the battalion headquarters. And we got pretty well bombed up. And then we went from Plymouth, England to Wales. We were there only 36 hours, and they had no time for us at all. Because then we took off for the invasion, and we were 3rd of June. The invasion was the 6th, but the weather was bad, and they canceled it for 24 hours. Then we got into France. France was terrible. And Belgium wasn't too bad.
Was this your first time away from home?
You mean out of the country?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, what did you miss most about the United States as you were overseas?
Home.
Home?
My mother's meals.
What was your job or assignment in Europe?
Company clerk.
Did you take any part in combat?
Well, D-Day was. And then we had some invasions that we had to take care of. People came in, didn't like us.
Could you describe D-Day to me a little?
Well, we boarded a ship in Wales. And then they started dropping death bombs, charges. And I said to one of the sailors, what are they trying to do? He says, we have submarines around us. We're trying to get rid of them. So then we docked, and there was a big rhino pulled up alongside of us, and we had to go over the top on a Jacob's ladder. That's one of those rope things you've seen on side of ships. Never on one in my life. When they took basic training, they forgot about me, because I was in battalion headquarters, and I had to crawl down that. Then we got on this landing barge. Some of the stuff came off, and then a winch operator from another company that came on board to help us froze, and he had a 6-by truck hanging over the side of the ship right above us on the barge. Well, stray bullet hit that thing, we'd have been done. So one of our fellows went back up the Jacob's ladder and brought it back on deck of the ship. And then we got orders to move in, and that's when the fellow says, now when we hit the beach, I'll open the tailgate, and you and your buddy take that disc off there. But then we got pinned down on the beach. And what happened was, on Utah Beach, they flooded the area, but all our fire tubers had jumped into the ground. So we had to wait till they got those bodies out of there and drain the field. So that's why we were held up. So about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we were walking toward this bivouac area, and it got dark. And a major says, when you get to the area, you'll find a shovel with a white handle. Dig yourself a fox and go to sleep. Who could sleep?
Mm-hmm.
So this fellow, Nick Cretton and I, he was one of the first cooks. He's from Cincinnati. We dug a hole. I slept this way, he slept that way. And when you looked up in the sky, it was like the 4th of July. All tracers, you know, going back and forth. And that's where we lived from D-Day till September. I lived till September 21st. I think that's where my arthritis came from. Because it was damp, and you didn't get a good meal. You always got rations. And so D-Day wasn't too pleasant, and then we weren't allowed to shave. I didn't have my clothes off for 10 days. So then the colonel issued orders that everybody could shave, but you couldn't build a fire to heat the water. So you know what it's like with a safety grease or cold water. It tears you out of there. Terrible. And there are things that happened on the beach that weren't so nice. One thing I remember, they had barrage balloons with bombs attached to them. So when these jerries came in, diving in to strafe us, it hit these cables. There's a bomb on it, blew the plane up. So one morning a guy came in there, he was new recruit, and got the first sergeant, and he told him he was a replacement. The first sergeant says, take your shovel, dig a hole, and I'll talk to you in the morning. You couldn't see, there was no lights. He took this shovel and dug a hole, he struck a landmine, got killed. First sergeant felt so bad about that, very bad. And one day my buddy and I wanted to clean up. So we filled our helmets with water, not heated, and we sat on our duffel bags. About as far from here to you. And we heard a shot. And Nick looked at me and he said, you all right? And I said, are you all right? He said, yeah. And he said, somebody doesn't like us. Because that thing went right between us. And you had to open the trains. And when they called, mess call, you went down, they gave you a box of rations.
How did you and your comrades regard enemy troopers as fighters? How did you and your comrades regard enemy troopers as fighters?
I think they were following orders. They had ideas of their own, but I think they were afraid to change them. They gave up pretty quick.
Could you describe your baptism of fire and your reaction to the experience?
Yes. The first time we were in the English Channel, and he bombed us. I was in the hold of the ship, and it sounded like the steel just came in and squeezed you. That was the first really. We had some in Scotland, but not very much. But everything was anti-aircraft. And some of those crazy things the United States did, I'll never understand.
If you or close friends were ever wounded in action, can you recount the circumstances?
No.
Okay, how did people entertain themselves during the war?
Well, I'll tell you, they kept you pretty busy. And when you weren't busy doing the duties, you were sleeping. Our outfit worked 12-hour shifts on the ship. So there wasn't too much time to loaf.
What impact did the USO have on your military service?
Well, I was stationed in Boston, and I was waiting for my buddies to come, and I had a couple hours wait, and I went to the Buddies Club, and they handed me a ticket to Schraff's Restaurant. It was a big restaurant here in Boston. And she said, just sit here a minute, I'll get somebody else. When the sailor came over, we had these 2 tickets to go to Schraff's Restaurant. So that's where we went. And they had a nice table there, the flags on and everything. And they gave us a menu, And the waitress says, now you order anything you want. Anything you like on here you can have. If you want a double, you can have double. So this sailor was a pretty good eater. He ate pretty good. I ate my share. So don't get me wrong. And we were finished, we wanted a bill. They said there's no bill. Boston was really good to the GIs. Really good.
Did the USO succeed in keeping up your morale?
Yeah, on the beach. We had a family from Pittsburgh. Man and woman, son and daughter, sang and danced. They gave a show at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and one at 4 and one at 7. So between the afternoon of 2 and 4, they were walking through the area talking. This man said to me, hey soldier, where are you from? I said, Pennsylvania. He said, what part of Pennsylvania? I said, western Pennsylvania. He said, whereabouts? I said, I'm 87 miles east of Pittsburgh, okay? I'll give you the name of the town closest. I said, I'm between Johnstown and Altoona. He said, I need the name of a town. I said, South Fork. He looked at me, he said, would you believe me if I told you I played football at the Brickyard in South Fork? I looked at him. I said, since you said that, I do believe you. He was on an independent football team that came to South Fork to play the South Fork independent team. And then about that time, one of the enemy planes flew over. They fly reconnaissance real high. He looked up at that thing and he says, boy, I hope that has a motor on it. But they were entertained.
Can you name any famous people that you saw at the U.S. shows?
A boxer, Muhammad Ali, is that his name?
Yeah.
I saw him box 3 rounds in England.
Okay, did you use V-mail?
Yes.
Could you explain how it was used?
Well, you just wrote on it and you sent it and they sent it back. It was very small stuff. It wasn't like a letter.
Did you have any of your mail censored at all? Any of your mail was censored?
Oh, yes. Everything we sent out from the beach was censored.
Were you able to receive mail often?
Not too often. And then we had, on the fellows who working on the ship, hit a mine. And this mine had, this ship had mail on it. It had loaded onto the barge. And when it hit the mine, the barge blew up too, and all that mail went to the bottom.
What was your immediate reaction to being discharged?
Happy.
What did you do in the days and weeks after being discharged?
Well, I just took it easy for a month. Then I went back to work at the railroad. I was a stockman at the engine house in South Fork.
Did you participate in any welcoming home celebrations?
Yeah, they had one here at Portage, out at Crichton McCormick Park.
Okay. Have you maintained contact with any people you met in your unit or over the war?
Yes. I had a very good friend from Lancaster, VA, John Herr. He was a designer from the linoleum and stuff for Armstrong Court. He and I became very close friends. And he would come to Portage and I'd get down to Lancaster. Then he died, he was 96 years old. I just talked to his widow last night. We kept in touch. And then the man that brought me that field desk, his father was from Rochester, New York. And Frank Romano was a nice guy. He was a kid, you know, same as I was. And I was out here shoveling snow one day, and Meredith came to the door and she says, Sam, there's a man by the name of Frank Romano on the telephone wants to talk to you. That's the first I heard from him since you were discharged. So then he and his wife came here in a good bit. And when I was left in Plymouth, England, they were moved out the outskirts, and we got a raid Frank would always say, boy, poor Sam's getting it again. One guy said that, hey, is Sam the only guy in his war?
Did you attend any reunions?
Yes. 2 of them I had.
Okay, how did the government reward veterans for their service in the war?
Well, that's pretty hard to say. They gave us $300 mustering out pay, which was nothing. They gave you $100 when you left, and they sent it to the others. And now this ship that was disabled with ammunition on it, those fellows worked straight through to get that ammunition off for General Patton. They were never rewarded. It was never even mentioned. And that's because the colonel we had was a no good. He could have said something, and he could have gotten a citation for it. But he didn't.
How did your service and war experiences affect your life?
Well, I hated to go, and I hated while I was in there because you couldn't call your life your own. But I never want to do it again. I'm just satisfied the way it is now, and I don't recall too many things, but every once in a while things pop up that you recall.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
Well, oh, this arthritis is something else.
Want me to help you out there?
Just bring this over to me now. You fellows know what that is? Watch it sharp.
What is it?
Shrapnel.
What's that?
When the weather got nice on the beach, we slept out on the ground. And on our foxhole, we dug in front of where we were sleeping, so that when the air raid would come, you would somersault in. So then when daylight came, you started to work your way out. So where I was sleeping, I found this. It was still warm. So if I'd have stayed here, you wouldn't have seen me. So that's one thing that I have there. And let's see what else is here. I have some pictures here if you have time. I don't know what your time limit is here. Whether you
We
to-
have plenty of time.
Now this is Utah Beach. Those are prisoners going down the road. And I had a leak in my camera. But this other picture here, the MPs had orders for anybody with a camera taking pictures of MPs or enemy equipment could be shot on the site or court-martialed. You know why? A lot of guys are good professional photographers, so they could sell those pictures and they come back to the States. So what happened here was my buddy stood across my foxhole and put my camera between their legs and shot this picture. And this is a picture of the 88mm gun that shot at us. And used to scare the daylights out of me. And the captain says, Sam, when you hear that, be thankful because it's past you. If you don't hear it, don't worry. Then I have a picture here of the monument. We were attached for the invasion to the 1st Engineers Special Brigade. And we have a picture here of the monument. Guns in place. I want to get a good picture here to show you this is a picture of an 88 millimeter German gun. And they had one on a track. Every time it was meal time, right before we'd eat, they'd shoot this off. It would go out on the track, shoot, and go back. Give you indigestion. They're like, I can't see where this monument is. Here's a picture far away. I have a better picture somewhere along the line there too. Now this is the only picture I have of the D-Day invasion.
So you were allowed to have cameras during the war? No?
We had a fellow from down east somewhere, he could be relevant for us. That's how we did it. He didn't get caught either. Now this is Utah Beach after D-Day. I want you to get a picture of the monument. First Engineer Special Brigade had a monument put up with every outfit that was attached to them for the invasion. And our first sergeant said, every man that's being discharged will see that monument before he leaves. And they sent me down there one day because I was leaving. Here's a celebration of D-Day, and that's our monument in the back, but I still have a better picture. And see, on this is the name, some of the names, and mine's the 300th Port Company. This is a picture of the monument as it is today, far away.
Where's that monument at?
Utah Beach.
Utah?
Here's the picture I'm looking for. Here's Utah Beach later on. That's the man that took the picture. That's his wife there. They go back. He married his German girl and he goes back every year. And when they found out that St. Marie and Lise, where we landed, that he was part of the invasion, they made him a king. Here's a better view of the gun emplacement. It was in a concrete pillar. The first celebration they had, I was going to go back and my wife got sick. She had cancer. And we didn't go. But Frank and his wife went. But he said, Sam, I'm glad you didn't go. We weren't even allowed near the monument. President, who was the president? I forget who it was visiting that day, you know. There's a picture of a German tank. Yeah, it's German. Must be the other below. It was an experience. No, I don't think anybody like to have that, because you don't have your clothes off for 10 days. It's so smelly. And this is it, right here. First Engineer Special Brigade. That's in front of the monument. See if there's anything else might interest you guys. You have to tell Margaret you're from my place. Well, we were good neighbors, I'll tell you. This is my friend Nick on the beach, and that's our foxhole where we slept. There's Nick again. He was something. Now this is the kind of emplacement that the 88s were in. Now this was the third man that slept with it. Thatcher was his name. We had two bunks on one side and one on the other. Then we had to talk about officers. We had a butter and egg man from Poughkeepsie, New York, thought he was Eisenhower. So he went out to the ship one day that they were working on, and the men weren't working. They had done what they were supposed to do, and they were waiting for the next orders. This Lieutenant Starr says to the sergeant, "Why aren't these men working?" So it was close supper time, supper hadn't come out yet. He said, "They're not going to do anything morally being smart." That lieutenant come in and court-martialed all 12 men, I forget. I had to write up the court-martial papers on a portable typewriter in that foxhole. And they cut out the cans of the fruit salad and all the cans, and they put candles in it for light. And I worked all night long. 8 o'clock in the morning, I was finished on a portable typewriter, 6 pages each. Papers had me down to the General Court Marshal's office for 10 o'clock. So Castellano and somebody else went with him, took him, another officer. And the Provost Marshal read it. "Lieutenant Starr, will you please stand?" Starr stood up, he says, "Don't you ever, ever, ever court-martial anybody for this again." And he tore them up and he says, "You're very lucky I don't take your rank from you." I was so dang mad after doing all that work. And Starr was a guy that he just thought he knew it all. But somebody from Poughkeepsie, New York knew he was butter and eggs, butter and eggs. didn't turn out too good either. That statue in the hole. Now this, the picture of the friend that went over there for their, that's Arm, he took this picture. This is only about 2 years old. And here's the cemetery. I'm trying to think of the name of the town where that is, that he visited. And here he is pointing to the 518th Port Battalion, all the companies in the 518th Port Battalion on it. 287, 289, 300, 301. That was the names of the companies that were there. So that's about the story there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having us over, and thank you for your
Is
interview.
there anything else you need, any questions?
I think we got it.
We're good.
I'll tell you what, we had, going over on the Argentina, that's when it brought the war brides back. In our compartment, not the ship, there were 279 men. And when one passed gas, everybody passed. And then we had to take turns about being out on the deck because we were crowded. So one night this carpenter we had in New York, he was an longshoreman, he lost his dentures in the ocean. And from the day he lost his dentures till they sent him home, it never was the same guy. He lost so much weight. We had another fellow from Kentucky that had one tooth. Every time he had to go out on the deck, he took the tooth out. And then the funniest part was the nurses we had on board. When they were out on deck, they were separated from the men. But every time you went out on deck when the nurses were there, the next day you got a shore-arm inspection. That was the funniest thing we ever saw. So outside of that, when I look and see if there's anything in this letter she wrote that I have a lot of junk in there, the badges and things like that. Well, I was walking guard duty one night in the States, and a guy from my outfit came by. I had no idea whether it was one of what they call fifth columnists then. They were out to kill anybody who belonged to the Army. And I didn't want to challenge them because I knew there was going to be trouble. And I found out who it was, I could have killed him then. He was in my outfit. Well, the first thing on D-Day from our ship, first thing we saw was the battleship Missouri firing salvo after salvo into the enemy lines. And I'll tell you, when we were on the beach, I think the P-38s were the ones that saved us more than anything else. Because they would come in low, and this one fellow in my outfit, he was a supply sergeant. His brother was a pilot on the P-38s. And those guys would come in, you could see the pilots. I said to Hallway, you think you'll see your brother on one of those raids? He said, you never know. But they strafed the enemy lines like you couldn't believe. You couldn't believe what they did. And then, while we were in our foxholes, you ate sand, you sleep sand with, did everything. And the day they bombed St. Lo. St. Lo was a German territory held by the Germans. They were giving us a lot of trouble. And one day it started. 5,000 United States bombers took off from England. And they bombed St. Lo. They came in this side, and then you'd see them coming back. And the guys got shot down, there'd be a space where they were. But in our foxhole, all day long, that sand just trickled down. I don't know how many times we cleaned our rifles to make sure there's no sand. I don't know whether today would be the same as it was then, but I don't think so. I think it'd be altogether different. So, like these roadside shellings over in Iraq and you know, in World War II, when your convoy was going somewhere, the convoy stayed to the aircraft people, says go. They strafed all sides of the road. They bombed all sides of the road. There was nothing to have those attacks. Why aren't they doing that now? But we are on the beach. We used to go to bed 7 o'clock at night because 11 o'clock, we called them Bed Check Charlie. Those guys would fly over in airplanes and drop flares. When they dropped those flares, you could have read a newspaper. That's how bright they were. And then there was the 90mm anti-aircraft guns. When they dropped those flares, they dropped this, we call them silver hairs or something, that set the automatic anti-aircraft guns off. And when a 90mm aircraft went off until you got it stopped, the whole earth shook. And that scared the daylights out, because you've heard it, Lieutenant Lewis said, there's Sam, get him, you know. But it was something else. It was something else. And then one night, we were sleeping in this foxhole, and the aircraft outfit from the United States was right near us, about as far as here across the street. Carl from Punxsutawney and I got good friends. And whenever the guys are on duty, when they got an alert, they would blow a police whistle. And if the attack was coming by tanks, the anti-aircraft gun was up in the air. If it was coming by air, the anti-aircrafts were lowered. So I walked down to see why there wasn't any action just across it. I didn't have my glasses on. And they had this barrel, this 75, 85 millimeter, whatever it was, anti-aircraft, lowered for tanks. And I walked right into it. This guy from Pennsylvania had a heart attack almost. He said, Sam, if we'd have been set for aircraft, you'd have been killed. I mean, or tanks, you'd have been killed. We're set for aircraft. He said, that was stage. I didn't have my glasses on, couldn't see. Oh, there were some things. And there were some funny things happened. There were some serious. We had a guy, I forget where he was from, but you know what jerry cans are? They had cans they used, and then they could build a fire. They would put these cans on the fire to heat the water to take a bath. And this Scala, he had his on there, and when he opened the top, steam blew out and burned his face. He was an awful looking mess. But there were so many things. We had one fellow got arthritis like I had. He laid on the stretcher for days. He'd go to sleep in the foxhole at night. In the daytime, they'd bring him out, and they finally took him back to the United States.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Oh, you're quite welcome. If there's anything else you can think of, or when you come back, you can get me again.
All right, we'll be back to take pictures of.
Oh, yeah.